Well, hey friends, welcome to
Hello.
this live-ish, pre-recorded, but we're doing it sort of off the cuff conversation between myself. I'm Vanessa Fernandez, and I'm the founder of the Enneagram Workshop, and my friend Michael, and he is a therapist, and I'll let him introduce himself, and we'll get started with our conversation.
Cool. So yeah, I'm Michael Shahan. I am a therapist in Kansas City, Missouri. I marriage and family therapist, which is slightly different from like a social worker or a licensed practicing counselor. They all have different parts to them, different specialties, I guess. And me as a marriage and family therapist, I'm very systemically minded as a therapist. So that doesn't mean I only see couples and families. That confuses people a lot. I see individuals as well, but I'm always thinking about them in the context of their relationships and their family and how, and sort of what has, looking at their sort of mental health systems in context of relationships and the things that people around them, not just sort of isolated. So I work with individuals, couples, sometimes families. And I specialize in a lot of trauma stuff as well. I learned a lot of, and I'm trained with a lot of ways to heal trauma. And I use the Enneagram in my practice a whole lot, more than almost pretty much any therapist I know. It's something that the last couple of years I've sort of transitioned into and have figured out and talked with hundreds and hundreds of hours with clients about their numbers, and it's helped me be curious about them. And I don't know, hope that makes sense. Definitely use it in my practice a lot, and I do it more and more, and I love it, and I love doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I loved when I first met you, Michael, and we were talking, like many times I get people who message me and say, I want to find a therapist who uses the Enneagram. And I just don't know how to point them because to my knowledge, there's no directory of Enneagram using therapists in the world.
But yeah, I don't think there's either.
But I think it is fascinating for a lot of people to hear from a therapist who uses the Enneagram. Let's say that you're not comfortable talking to your therapist about the Enneagram, but you still know your type. What are some things that each type sort of does that can hinder their therapy experience? And what
That's
are some
good.
things that they can do that are kind of natural to their type that would really help them to grow? Like I know for me, being a 3, the first time I went to therapy, I was literally like trying to impress my therapist.
Get a good grade in therapy.
But like with how bad I was. Like it was like like,
interesting.
like I really need therapy a lot. I'm gonna impress you of how much I need therapy. And it was just like I didn't think about until I started like being like, Vanessa, what is going on? Like, and I just started asking myself questions, and I realized that. So for me,
that's awesome.
You know, being really honest with my therapist, like fully honest.
Sure.
And being honest, therefore, with myself was something that was helpful. So I don't know, have you noticed, are there certain things that each type can sort of do that kind of brings therapy to a halt, right? Because you can come into the therapy room and not be as open to changing and growing as maybe you could be.
Yes. Do you want to go through every number really quick?
Do you mind? I think that'd be so helpful.
No, I don't mind at all, because I think it look really different for each number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even in this material I'm developing, I'm doing this thing like this sort of warning labels for each number for the therapist. Like you have a 3 in your office, they're going to want to try to impress you. Like they'll like almost warn of what to watch out for, because so much of therapy is learning how to do new things and learning to get comfortable with what's uncomfortable and doing and changing your patterns, and you can't do that if you don't. Seeing the patterns really helps. So let's start with ones. Ones in therapy want to do therapy perfectly. A lot of times it's like they want to do, I don't give a lot of like homework assignments a whole lot, but if I do, ones will do them. They will do them well, and they will do them. Yeah, it's almost like which is weird as ones, because the one pattern is to overly perfect things and overly improve themselves. And so sometimes therapy can look, I don't know, trying to do it really well, trying to do it perfectly, try not to mess up, with the goal. I don't know, it's so tricky for ones, because the goal of therapy is to improve yourselves. improve yourself, but also like improving yourself is like crack to ones. So
Right.
it's like part of it takes getting worse. Ones aren't going to want things in life to fall apart first. They're going to think that means something's going wrong, when in reality, that actually means something's going really well. That's actually a sign that you're doing things well, not that you're doing things. I think ones more than anybody would think, oh, this isn't working, I should stop because it's making things worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To me, that really fits for ones that could stop things by thinking this isn't going well, or I'm not doing good enough at this, so I need to stop. Or it's bringing up uncomfortable things in me, difficult emotions that I usually deem as bad. And so I don't want to do this anymore. Do you have any input, or you want me to just keep going?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Do you find that ones are a little bit more guarded to open up about sort of the skeletons in the closet because it's not a good thing, or do they not have skeletons in the closet? I don't know, maybe ones don't even have the skeletons in the closet to begin with.
I think ones, when they can be really unhealthy, they don't even know they have it because it's so shoved out of their own awareness.
Right.
Like I had a guy who saw me with his wife for over a year and then admitted eventually to sort of multiple affairs. And he was like, I didn't even think about bringing that up because I was so shoved down on like, that's not okay that I did that. And I need to keep improving and moving away from that. I was going to say one more thing about ones too. Ones, for whatever reason, also have a really hard time. A lot of ones that I know, that my clients have a hard time getting into sort of somatic body exercises, sort of like mindfulness, meditation, feeling their body. They think it's weird a lot of times. They're like, this is weird, this is stupid, this is uncomfortable. Yeah, for whatever reason, ones are the most resistant I've seen to those things. Yeah, they just think it's not helpful because ones are in that body type, the gut type, who almost want to repress that sort of body instincts. So to me, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and they're also in the dependent stance, which is thinking repressed, which just means that their thinking is not productive, and so they can tend to get into their heads and kind of be like, am I doing this meditation right? Why am I thinking this thought? I shouldn't think that. Let me think this.
Yes,
and so not, their minds just kind of keep them locked up and not able to just really get into their gut and just be like, you know what, I can't understand it, but I'm just gonna like go for it. That's a really a more difficult thing to do.
So true. Yeah, because they almost stop themselves from moving forward by not perfectly understanding it. That's a great point. I'm even picturing several one clients who are exactly like it's wild. Like I try to meditate, but all I could think was I'm doing this wrong, and it's like, then kind of you were actually meditating then. You were being aware of your thoughts. Like you just didn't realize it. You were. It maybe didn't look like what you thought it was supposed to look like, but you were aware of your thoughts of not doing well enough, and that's meditating. Good job.
Yeah, and I find a lot of ones that I coach, I encourage them to do sort of a mental dump before they meditate. So kind of just writing out stream of consciousness, especially if it's in the morning, just write out sort of stream of consciousness and either just throw that paper away, or if there's to-do lists on that paper, just kind of know that it's there waiting for them when they're done meditating. And that seems to be helpful to a lot of ones to just be able to like get their head sort of centered before they do their meditation practice.
Totally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
All right. How about twos?
Twos like to take care of their therapist emotionally. It's hard for them to make it about them, even though that's why they're there. My two clients are very perceptive of if I had a difficult session emotionally beforehand. They're like immediately clued in on like, are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Or I don't know, depending on the client, but they can feel that. They can feel, even if I like think I'm doing a really good job of hiding it, they know. They're really good in tune on that. And so part of the twos work in therapy is not doing that. And it gets really uncomfortable when they intentionally don't take care of me, or I don't let them take care of me, right? Because it's sort of about them. Right. And they can, I think they can worry a lot about what I think, how I feel about them compared to other numbers, like hoping I like them, or hoping that they're impressive or not hurting my feelings, or because as in the first session with all my clients, I always tell them, look, if I've hurt your feelings or you're upset with me, I want you to tell me. That's part of good therapy, is learning how to express those things and learning about yourself through that. Like maybe what I did wouldn't have hurt somebody else. Maybe what I did wasn't like intentionally mean, but you perceived it that way. And yeah, I don't know. They're good conversations to have. And twos have a hard time having those conversations. I've had to beg. I had a client who's a 2 once. I asked her if I'd ever hurt her, and she was like, well, yeah. And then she like felt guilty for admitting it. And she's like, I don't want to tell you though. I don't want to mention it. Like she didn't even want to tell me that I had hurt her feelings before. So it was like scary for her.
Yeah. One of my clients, she will never tell, she's going through a hard time. She will never let anyone around her know unless they are not going through any hard things in their life. Like she will, until her friends are in like a good season and not struggling with anything, which honestly rarely ever happens. That like, no, I'm totally fine. Nothing's happening. But she like holds it all in until feels like her friends are strong enough to bear what she's going through. So that sounds kind of similar to like, even with a therapist, like, no, but are you okay? Maybe I shouldn't share with you fully because, you know.
Even though that's my job and that's why they're there, that unconscious piece of them, like, it's such a hard time letting them go that direction.
Yeah.
And it's hard to hear it's hard to hear from a 2. They won't share bad things. It's hard for them to share bad things unless they're really, really bad. Unless it's like it's hit a breaking point and they can't not sort of lose it in my office. Because they try so hard to sort of keep it all together and want to take care of everybody and stuff like that.
Right. That's good. What about threes? What is threes that kind of like hinder good therapy?
So let me know if it gets a little too personal since you're a 3.
Go for it.
Okay, good. Threes really want to impress the therapist a lot, like want to do a good, in like what your example earlier, it's so interesting, like not necessarily impressed with being really good, but impressed with like being the best at whatever it is, even if it's being dysfunctional. Like I'm the most dysfunctional client you have, trust me. And almost wanting to be very unique, threes a lot of times want, like similar to 2s, they want to know my thoughts about them a lot. Like, what are you writing down over there? What do you think about me? And a lot of times, like, you think I'm crazy, don't you? Because so much 3s can be so driven by other people's expectations of them. And so like they can be so caught up in that, in what I expect of them and what I think about them. Similar way to 2s. I think it's a little bit different. But yeah, 3s want to almost, it's hard for 3s to let go of their image. Like I want my therapy office to be a place where people can just kind of take a deep breath and just let whatever needs to come out of them. Just be fully, and that's hard for 3s because they need to keep like zipped up all the time, I think. And it's really, really hard for 3s to feel sadness, when a lot of times that's the most important thing for them to feel in therapy. Like, especially because even the time of day matters in the therapy session. I have 3 clients who don't want to see me in the middle of the day because if they get into heavy emotions, they feel like it wrecks their productivity for the rest of the day. So it's like, I want to see you at the end of the day. I think a lot of 3s can feel like if they go there, they'll never be able to come back. It just feels like such like a quicksand, all encompassing. Like if I let myself feel this grief, then it's never going to stop, and I'll be lost in it. And so it's hard for them to. I remember a 3 client of mine, we talked about that pattern of hers, like things would build and build and build, and she'd like just express it to me and grieve, and she would feel awful for like a day or 2, and then she would feel the best she had had in a long time. But she had to be willing to sort of step through that really difficult, emotionally difficult, maybe even not as productive few, like 24 to 48 hours afterwards. Yeah, it's really interesting, their hesitancy to go to those emotions like that.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of aggressive types, and when I'm coaching them, I really try to make sure, aggressive types are 7s, 8s, and 3s. And I really try to make sure that they, I like to use the word respect their feelings and their emotions. It's one thing to just acknowledge, yeah, I have them, eye roll, like, ugh. But it's another thing to actually respect them, you know, like I have
I like
them
that.
and they deserve a place in my life and they deserve to be felt and they deserve to have like a space for them. And whenever you do that, then you're able to move forward. And if you don't do that, and sometimes doing that doesn't have to take that long, or it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It just feels like it is. When you actually,
Yes,
you know, it's
yes.
almost like that chore that you've been putting off for like a million years, and then you do it, and you're like, "Oh, this took me 15 minutes." Like,
Yeah,
it's
yes.
not that bad, but if you don't do it, it ends up like weighing you down without even realizing it. And so it's really important for aggressive numbers to like make space to honor those feelings. But it's not as bad as as you think it is.
Yeah, and it's actually like less productive
Yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
not like you think it's more productive to shove them down.
Yeah.
But it's actually more productive in the long term for you and your health to not. But I heard Beatrice Chestnut once say she heard a quote from a 3 who said emotions aren't very aerodynamic. Which is like perfect. Like I can't go play. It slows me down. That's how 3s can see emotions.
Yes, yes, 100%. And just one thing to add from a 3 that I think can slow a 3 down or hinder the therapy process is impatience. And I'm saying that from my
Oh.
own experience. The first 2 or 3 sessions that I had when I first started therapy, and I was like, she hasn't given me anything to do. We haven't gotten anywhere. Like nothing is happening. Like I need to find another therapist. I need to go somewhere else. I need to do something else. This isn't happening fast enough. I need to be.
Wow, that's perfect.
And it was like my friends really had to encourage me to like trust the process, and that just feeling the feelings and getting my bearings and talking things out is part of the process, and it doesn't feel like a solution has come. But that's okay. And so that was just that impatience was really kind of getting in my way when I was first starting.
That makes so much sense because as a 3, it's a sort of that's such a threat. To slow down feels like such a threat, and to not get things done and achieve. That makes what a great addition to that. That's perfect.
Yeah. All right. What about 4s?
4s are another really interesting case because I don't know. I mean, they're all interesting in their own unique ways with therapy. But I think 4s from what I've seen, 4s can tend to come to therapy less in the first place because they almost take refuge in their difficult emotions. They almost like them more than any other number. So it's like, why would I go to a therapist to talk about it? Nothing's wrong with me. Like, or I don't want to, almost maybe a piece of them not wanting to change it, not wanting to stop feeling that way, which is really interesting. They can keep them from coming in the room in the first place.
You think it's also that they feel like, well, my therapist won't even understand me.
Yeah, okay, sure.
You know, like it won't even help because no one gets me.
Totally, yes. Yeah. Like there's such a filter on a 4, even if somebody is maybe understanding them, it's hard for them to see that they are, or they're always thinking that other people aren't understanding them. And 4s are already, it's interesting. So also 4s in therapy, sometimes I've asked them to, like it's so opposite from like a 1, where every week the 4 comes in, it's like this week has been the worst week ever, or it's like they almost overdo the difficulties in life. And so to sort of, sometimes it takes encouraging a 4 to look more on the positive side, but that can feel really inauthentic for a 4. So to do the sort of the work to sort of balance out feels authentic and not inauthentic and not helpful for a 4. It's like, no, I need to express all these things. And if I don't get it all out, you're asking me to not get this out and not focus on these. That's inauthentic. And how can that help? Yeah, it can feel less than helpful to step away from the things that are important for them to step away from.
Yeah. I feel like 4s sometimes also feel like the rules apply to everyone else, but it won't work for them. So even like when I offer both activities for clients that I'm coaching, and I say, well, maybe try this will help bring balance, and just using the Enneagram for that. I can almost see it because I'm a 3 and I can read people's faces very well. I can almost see it in the type 4 spaces where they're like, yeah. And in the back of their mind, they're like, that's not going to work for me. And I'm not going to do it. Like, know that like, they're not going to try it because it doesn't,
and
whatever.
even hesitant to sort of be defined by their Enneagram number.
Sure.
And yeah, that's more in the Enneagram space, not necessarily the therapy space.
Right.
But yeah, doing some business consulting with a group of people who worked together yesterday over Zoom, of course, because I can't do it in person anymore right now. But this guy who's a 4, I was sort of like, is this accurate? Is this accurate? And it was always yeah, sure, okay, sure. Like this never like everyone else like that is so me. He was like, yeah, I'll give you that. It's not quite right, but okay. Like it was just very like it's never. Yeah, it applies to everybody else, but not me. I don't. Yeah, which is super interesting.
Yeah, well, and it's also interesting for us in therapy because they are very in tune with themselves and probably one of the most aware numbers. Every number has a blind spot, but 4s tend to be, at least all the 4s that I know, and I have a strong 4 wing as well. They kind of do a lot of their own spiritual work and inner work alone. Like they're a withdrawing number and they kind of just do a lot of work alone. So that can be, I don't know, maybe a good thing, but also a challenge when it comes to therapy.
Yeah, because that's a lot of the places I want all my clients to get at is this place of like awareness, but sometimes 4s come in with that already.
Exactly.
Which is just really interesting. And even I don't know, it's 4s, it's hard to believe. So I share a lot with my clients what I believe about them and the value I see in them. I never fake it, but if I'm just like really excited to see a client or really impressed with their work or really just light up when I see them, I share that with them. I think that's an important part of my work. And 4s, it's like, no, you're not. It's easy for them to like, no, I'm not. You're not excited to see me. Like it's for them to, it's hard. I think every number, especially 2s, 3s, and 4s, that's hard for them to believe when I share how much I value them, which makes sense. And that sort of heart triad with the identity piece. Yeah, 4s are really interesting in therapy. I have less 4s than probably any other number. 4s and 7s, but more so 4s. Yeah. And I think for their own opposite reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Right. How about 5s?
5s, we're entering the head space, the head triad, which has its own set of unique difficulties in therapy, for sure. Yeah. 5s, and similar to 5s want to learn all the things, not feel all the things. Like they want to sort of know the why on what they're doing and where it came from, and which is
the danger with that. Like what's the danger between only knowing and not feeling?
But when you're just knowing and not feeling, you're only using half of your brain to process all these things, right? You're just using your left.
Yeah.
There's so much. I was even talking to a client the other day who asked me like, why do I need to feel these things? What's even important about this? And she's a 5. So she's like, this is stupid. This is useless. Like if it doesn't move anything forward, help anything, like almost wanted me to convince her that it was going to be helpful, that it was, or cite studies that show that feeling emotions is going to improve her life or something. But when we talk about things, right, it feels good to talk about things, process things with people that we know, right? Like just getting that out there verbally. When we feel things emotionally, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of doing it. It's a way to make things, to process things, to sort of organize our minds. It's just done emotionally instead of like intellectually with language.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like a different way of processing and sort of so I'm a therapist who works with trauma a lot. What trauma kind of is at its core is too much happening too fast for us to process. Whether that's and so when things go unprocessed, we haven't made sense of them yet. And we are such meaning making machines as humans that if we haven't made sense of things and they haven't sort of put them in their boxes and where they go, then that causes all sorts of distress and it causes all sorts of negative false beliefs about ourselves to sort of, if I can't understand it, then maybe I'm the problem or I'm bad or something's wrong with me, because at least that makes sense.
Right.
And so talking things through and feeling things through both help process all of these things inside of us and put them into boxes and integrate those parts of us well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So essentially, there has to be an understanding in all three centers of intelligence for us to be able to
Yes.
release
Yes.
the effects of the trauma. So we have to engage our minds and kind of understand it here. We have to understand it here, and we have to understand it in our bodies. Otherwise, we can't move on. So there's no sort of shortcutting it and just intellectually figuring it out. You're still going to be held back because it hasn't been understood by the other parts.
Yes. And actually, our intellectual cognitive rational piece is actually the slowest to understand and make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like technically, even like neurological, like it's that's the latest evolved part of us, and the sort of the least, it's the slowest. If people, I'm always looking for very experiential things to happen in the therapy room. When that happens, things shift 100 times faster than just a cognitive understanding.
Yeah.
Like have this experiential thing where a client is able to share something with me they've never shared before. Like, for example, the client came in very first session. She and she's in the head triad, and she said that she was I could feel the shame radiating from her about this. She sort of got an argument with her husband, and then sort of went in her closet and then wanted to hurt herself and sort of like cut at herself. And she'd never done that before. And she told me that, and she wouldn't even look me in the eye because she was so ashamed. And then when she finally looked up at me, I was just like, man, thanks. Just, I mean, totally accepting. Like, thank you for sharing that. Like, and I thanked her for sharing that for me. And I even like kind of wept with her for how much she was hurting. And she just looked at me. She was so confused. Like, why are you doing this? And I asked her, she expected something very, very different. And to have that experience, not just knowing that I accept that, but having the experience of sharing with me, being vulnerable, and me fully accepting that part of her, shifted so much in her so fast, which is so different than just a cognitive understanding.
Yeah.
I don't want to overtalk that. Exactly.
Is that why you think doing things like therapy or counseling, or even having resolving a conflict or something with another human being is
Yes.
so necessary? Like, books are great, reading articles is great, like doing all of that, it can help your inner work a lot. But do you think that there's no way outside of actual human interaction and relationship to really find health and growth and healing? Like, I don't think there's any substitute for that.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. We're so relationally and socially wired, right? It's so important. I think I don't think it's a both and here, because I think there's a whole like happiness is an inside job. I don't know if you heard that before.
Yeah. And
we need other people. It's both. It's not I need to do it without other people, or I need to do it only on my own. It's definitely a combination of both.
Yeah.
The experiential piece, to bring it back to the 5, it's so important for them to feel things. It is so hard for them, and it's so scary to feel those things in front of another human being.
Right.
So terrifying for them.
Yeah.
Because they're actually a lot of times I think 5s can be really aware of their emotions, but they don't want to show it.
Yeah.
And it's too scary and too vulnerable feeling.
Right.
But yeah, 5s have a hard time going to the emotional places. It takes a lot of pushing and prodding for me, and sort of herding them toward their emotions and keeping them there rather than just giving them what they want and helping them make sense of things.
Right. Yeah, that's good. All right, what about 6s in therapy?
And 6s they're dead center of that head triad, and so they don't have a wing outside of it, and so they're kind of lost in their own thoughts. Just today I was sitting with a client and asking her, like, it's so interesting when I started noticing what was happening, because I didn't at first. I was like, how did you feel this? And she's like, well, I thought this. I'm like, oh, that's not what I asked. And she just kept bringing it back to what I thought and how she made sense of it and wanting to understand the big picture of it. And I'm like, that's not what I'm wanting you to do right now, because that's kind of what you always do. That's what's kept you stuck. Yeah. In a lot of ways. Yeah, usually the thing that we're so entrenched in, the sort of ego habits or the sort of personality traits, have worked before, but they don't work anymore. And the job of me as a therapist is to like point out how they're not working and sort of let them sit in it not working, so they can learn a different way to do it, or learn that, hey, I can actually be okay not doing these things to protect myself.
Yeah. I always
sorry,
go ahead.
No, you.
I always tell my clients, like, if they're a 6, let's say, like, you can't out 6 your 6 by being a 6. Like,
Yeah,
that
that's
doesn't work. There's
Mm,
no, you have to see that
that's amazing.
same, your sixness or whatever it is just going to keep you there. And the only
Hmm.
way out is to go a different direction. And it's
And
hard.
I think that's true in its own way for every number.
Yeah.
You'll try to sort of escape your number using the same energy that got you in it in the first place, that you're in the first place. which is such an interesting part of therapy. Like when I know the place that they're in and try to do, I don't have to know where they need to go. All I know is what they need to not do in this moment. And I fully believe that naturally healing things are going to come out of them already. Like I don't have to know where they're going to go, which
Yeah.
is really cool and relieving for me as a therapist.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, 6 is just really, really hard to get on their own heads. Really hard to get on their heads. It takes some serious pushing and prodding. Or I think some difficulties with therapy is the lack of trust for the therapist, because
Mm-hmm.
at 6 is then there's sort of difficulties with authority figures and trusting, and how do you as a therapist, how do you get to tell me what to do? What are your qualifications?
Yeah.
Can I trust you? Can I trust this process? Who are you to be right about? Like that can be it can take a lot longer for a 6 to build trust with their therapist.
Yeah. How do you deal with when a 6 doesn't necessarily know what the problem is? They just know there is a problem, and they're having a hard time settling on it. And I'm asking this because, so my daughter, I'm pretty sure, almost 100% sure, she's a 6. And she'll write me little notes saying, I'm stressed, but I don't know why I'm stressed. Can you help me figure it out? So she's feeling the anxiety, but she can't identify it. And then when I ask her, well, is it because of this? I don't know. Is it because of this? I don't know. Could it be that this happened? I don't know. And I think it's just that lack of trusting her own intuition, the lack of trusting her own ability to know what she's feeling, or what she, So I want to direct her back to her own, her own inner compass, but she really is very desperately like, I don't know. So how do you balance guiding 6s to trust themselves when at the same time they're so disconnected from sort of their own center?
And that's such an awesome question, and it gets so tricky and interesting with the 6s, because like if you're trying to help her figure out where the anxiety is coming from, you're sort of doing what she's already trying to do. You're helping her with her 6ness. Does that make sense? Because 6 is trying to figure out, why am I anxious? Because if I can make sense of it, and then if I can make sense of it, then I'm not anxious anymore. It's like I heard a quote from Suzanne Stabile, what's the quote? It was on Instagram recently about the 6's worst case scenarios don't cause anxiety. They're an attempt to get rid of anxiety. So it's an attempt to sort of something like that, wanting to mitigate the anxiety that they're feeling by thinking of worst case scenarios.
Right. It's almost
so I think with the 6, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Yes. And so maybe with your daughter right now, she can't. She doesn't know how to get it. She can't figure it out. So she's stuck in that anxiety, which, like, what I was just doing with a 6 client today is like, what's that like? Like I was pushing her and like, what is it like? And she's like, I don't know the answer. I don't know what's doing it. I don't know why. And I'm like, okay, good. What's that like? Like, I'll stop trying to figure it out. I know that's where they naturally want to go so easily and so quickly, but just like, what is that like? How do you experience in your body when you don't understand it? Because so much of it's an intolerance of that anxiety. So in a 6's mind, if I can figure out what's causing it or make a plan, then I don't have to feel what's so uncomfortable for me. But instead, going the back route and learning how to be more comfortable with what is uncomfortable is the hard work for a 6.
Yeah.
Like not answering their questions, which is so hard. I like today, that client, she's like, I said, I was like, are you getting defensive with me? She's like, yes, I'm sorry. You're pushing me places I don't want to go. And then I was like, oh gosh. And I knew I was doing that, but just even hearing that directly as a 9 was like, oh, I'm being mean. I shouldn't be doing this. It's so weird.
It's so funny. If I was her therapist, I would be like, yes, I am pushing you places you don't want to go. And that's what I'm here for. So
That's so funny. And that's so opposite for me. It's like, I can intellectually know that's what I'm there for.
right.
But it's still so, but I think my client knew when we talked about it at the end, she knows I wouldn't push if I didn't really care about her. Because I wouldn't spend that energy that it takes for me as a 9 to do that if I didn't care about her.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
So yeah, that's 6. 6
That's
is
good.
interesting.
All right. What about 7s?
7s are one of the numbers that are, 7s are in my opinion, the flakiest people when it comes to therapy. They'll get started and then they'll ramp up and then they're gone. And I'll tell 7s every time, very intentionally, like, this is going to get worse before it gets better. So like a construction zone, traffic sucks for a long time, but it's going to be better and more efficient and whatever, feel better afterwards. If you can stick with me during that time, then this is going to be better. But that's seriously multiple 7 clients, like, just completely. The only clients I've ever had completely just ghost me and never even like respond after a couple sessions are 7s, which is really interesting. So they can be flaky. Another thing is 7s can also think they're feeling their emotions, but they're actually thinking about their emotions. They're not actually feeling it. They're making sense of it. They can even deceive themselves in that way.
Is that similar to the 5 almost? Like almost the same thing, but on the other side?
I think so. In a way, I don't know. I've never thought about that before. I think 5s know they're deceiving themselves more than 7s.
Okay.
Like, my old supervisor is a 7, and she is one of the most amazing people I know. Therapist for years and years and years. And just like a couple months ago said, I had no idea that I wasn't actually feeling a lot of things. I had no idea. And she was a therapist, which is just wild. I mean, she doesn't give herself enough credit. She wasn't horribly doing, like, she wasn't never feeling anything. It's just not to the extent that she was actually able to, like, her emotions. She never let her emotions fully in certain places. 7s can look at things, can positively reframe things really quickly and really easily. And so, which is, I have a client who's a sexual subtype 7, and he's like, almost has this weird obsession with me telling him hard things. He's like, oh, I want you to say something that I'm not expecting and make it hard, because I get to grow so much from it, and it's so exciting when I get to learn new things. And it's so almost the hard thing for him is like, not telling him, like, what would it be like not to, I don't know. He might also be counterphobic 6. I'm not 100% sure, but he has this like obsession with hard things and wanting,
like, he's
things
trying to turn therapy into like an extreme sport or something. Like,
yes, exactly.
and
he's in extreme sports.
And like,
yeah, and that's a perfect example, because he's into extreme sports. I won't say a lot of identifying information, but he's very much in extreme sports. And he like, so sometimes what's challenging for him is for me to not say something difficult to him, and not to have this big new burst of awareness and sort of shift in way of thinking, a new amazing experience where he was broken down and then rebuilt his way of thinking, like this huge exciting thing. Like, for him to not do that feels really mundane and scary for him. But yeah, 7s. Depending on the 7 subtype as well. The social 7 can be really concerned about the therapist as well, like a 2.
Yeah, I know with a lot of my 7 clients, it's even difficult sometimes because of the reframing for them to accurately remember something that happened in the past, and to even remember, like, the pain of it. And like you said, if we can't see it, if we can't take it apart, if we can't understand it, then we can't grow from it, take lessons from it, etc. And again, it's not like they're trying to be deceptive, but they just literally, when they retell the story, it's not the same thing as what actually happened, and there's a lot missing. So that can be a challenge sometimes. I'm coaching 7s. I don't know if you've experienced that as well.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I hadn't thought of that yet. I have a couple clients who had some really severe trauma in their lives, like really bad stuff. And in telling me about it, and it's like years ago in their lives, they're like, yeah, and then the next day I went back to school and then I went back to my life, or like, no, it was okay. It was, I mean, it is what it is. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you not, like, either A, you have processed through this so well and you're just unbelievably emotionally aware of it, or you're completely in denial. It's like, it's so amazing how much they can be sort of in denial about the pain. And when they start to just barely touch it, it's like, even I feel it, like, this is going to be huge. This feels really scary and difficult because you've never let yourself feel this. It's going to be extra big.
So how do you encourage a 7 to kind of be open, even allowing themselves to remember how something really was? Is it more of just kind of intentionally allowing themselves to be open to it? You know, because I know that we can like kind of shut ourselves off or open ourselves up with intention, or is there something more that 7s, if they're like, I genuinely can't remember accurately this being as terrible as I'm sure it was, what do I do? How do I unlock that memory?
Yes. A couple things. One thing that I've done with 7s is have them picture somebody they really love and care about experiencing the same thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, they feel a lot more about it. Because when it's them, directly to them, it's like, no, I'm fine. But if it's a friend that had to go through the same thing, they see it, they can feel it very differently. And then even process through that, desensitize that, understand that, and then slowly shift it back to them. Or even if that's too close, I've had clients even watch movies and sort of, that reminded me of this piece of my childhood, but it's this very distant, separate thing, but still a slight access to that pain. It's almost like easing your way into it, like movie, picturing somebody else going through it, and then eventually working your way to yourself. I feel like it's a really practical way that I've done that with people.
That's so interesting. I have a friend who actually does a lot of therapy through the arts, whether it's watching movies or even acting in plays where you're a different character, but it's a similar scenario. And I don't understand how all of it works. I love that. Yeah, where it's like separate enough that your walls aren't up, but
yes
enough that it still hits home. I think that's really interesting.
I do sand tray therapy, was basically like, there's like a sandbox thing I have in my office and all these miniature figurines, and I have people, adults, like this was sort of meant for kids, but it's actually, in my opinion, it's incredible for adults. They sort of build out different things, and so it's almost externalized, and they're like, so it's easier to talk about that rather than talk about what's happening in me. And people like, did I just start like weeping, or like, did I just build that? And it's another way of kind of going around those sort of ego defenses of not wanting to feel things and sort of expressing it accidentally. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7s are really interesting in therapy.
All right. How about 8s?
8s, what kind of trips them up? 8s are really hard for 8s to lead. If I say, how are you doing? 8s are probably never going to lead with emotions right away. It's like, I'm really busy, or this is happening, or works this way. It's hard for them to get in touch with those emotions, or they don't want to share. That'll be like the second or third or fourth thing that they'll share if I keep asking.
Right.
It's so hard for 8s to be vulnerable in therapy. It's probably more than any other number. I had this, speaking of art stuff, I had this client sort of like, for weeks after weeks, I could like sense this emotion just like right there. But it was just like, it'd go and then stop, and then go and then stop. And I had her draw that, she drew like this stomach, and then all this crazy stuff happening in it, and this harsh line where the stomach was going up. Like, it's all in there. It's all blocked in there. Like, I can't come out. I'm shoving it. But when they do, yeah, I think it's the hardest thing for an 8 is to be vulnerable, and to admit, and just sort of be vulnerable with another person, and trust me, and trust that it's okay to be vulnerable. And that's actually a good thing, because it feels so much like weakness, and they'll feel so gross the next day. They'll have like a vulnerability hangover. Like, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done that. That was really stupid. My therapist probably hates me, or why did I do that? That was weakness. But I'll tell you, like, my clients who are 8s, I have a few who would just like, nowadays they'll just kind of come in and especially their life is really hard and they'll just start crying right away. Part of me loves that in a weird way, because it's like, you really trust this space.
Yeah.
Like, you have to trust this space. This has to feel so safe for you to let yourself do that.
Right.
And so it feels like a huge honor when an 8 can get there, but it can take a while for sure.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice for type 8s, is to give yourself time to let your walls come down, like almost similarly to where 3s want it quickly. And so it's like,
Yes. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Mm-hmm.
Like, I think 8s also need to stay in it, but for different reasons of like, it's gonna feel safe, but maybe not until a couple sessions in, but worth it to like stay in it for a couple sessions.
Yes. And side note, sorry, what were you saying?
Do you find that happens, that it's like,
oh yeah,
there's a breaking point, it just takes a little while?
Yeah, sometimes with 8s, months. It can be months, especially if like their life is really chaotic.
Yeah.
I think, and it's like, because it's like, I don't want to go somewhere else and have it feel even more chaotic. I want to have it together. I think most everybody, it takes several sessions to get vulnerable, unless maybe you're 4, maybe. But 8s I think it can take even longer for 8s compared to lots of other numbers. Because yeah, it can feel really scary. And what's interesting, and 8s can very much be like, tell me what to do, just tell me. Or sometimes, which is interesting, I've had some clients say that, usually when they're at a complete loss for what to do and they're grasping for control. It's like, help me get control. Right. Tell me what to do. Right. And then to sort of, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done as a therapist. It's like, I don't want to be another person in your life telling you what to do. Especially this specific client I'm thinking of. It's a female 8 who grew up in a very evangelical background, who's told over and over again that like, you're not doing this right, you're too much, you're too all these things. And it's interesting, in 8s, my regular, I sort of, a lot, as I'm talking with clients, there's a lot of like, oh, wow, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I can see that. No, okay, sure. Just almost like attuning to them and stuff. And I had an 8 client to me say, he was like, I don't mean to be mean, but like, you don't have to say that. I know that makes sense. And so I was like, oh, okay, sorry. Like, it was hard to stop. Yeah. Like, 8s can be sort of taken aback by and weirded out by that kind of attuning to them. Right. Or it can feel uncomfortable for them. It can feel vulnerable. For me to sort of approach them with open arms, metaphorically, can be uncomfortable for them, because it can feel like whoa, what are you doing? What do you want from me? This isn't safe or something.
Yeah, I love coaching 8s because, I love not having to have, I guess as a 3, I always feel like I have a filter up and I'm always reading people to kind of wonder, like, am I being too strong? Am I not being strong enough? Did what I say land home? Do I need to say it a different way? And an 8 will not only like just tell me straight up whether it hit or not, but also I feel like I don't need a filter, especially when some like, and coaching is a little different than therapy because I'm really trying to like give them actionable things, call them on their stuff. And so I love being able to kind of like meet an 8's intensity right where they're at and be like, listen, here's the truth. This is fine. This is not. Let's work on it. Like, I just love having that with an 8. That's fun for me.
It is, and I love that you said that too, because it took me, especially as a 9, a long, long time to realize that when 8s say they want that, they actually mean it. Because like as a 9, I'll say like, I want you to be honest with me, but inside I'm like, well, please don't actually say this, and I don't want to do that. But like, wait a second, you actually mean that? And she's like, yeah. And I've asked 8s before, like, I want you to try, like, they're like, I wouldn't be here still if I didn't trust you. So like, go on, say what you need to say. Right. Yeah. And it's actually can be refreshing for me as a 9 to let out that like, kind of like I remember one time I had this 8 client who goes at that place, like, tell me what to do. What do I need to do? And I was like, okay, let me entertain you. You need to feel what you're not wanting to feel right now. And then she just shut off emotionally. And there was like this, no, I can't. And I was like, what the? you just, and I shared with her, I was like, I just asked you to do this and you did the exact opposite. Like, and almost like let my frustration out.
Yeah.
Because I knew it would be welcomed for her. And that's kind of how eights, I think, can feel safe, is like, if I can sort of spar with you and you can stand your ground and you're not intimidated by me, then I feel safer with you.
Yeah.
So actually for me as a therapist, to tell an 8 that I'm upset with him can actually be really helpful, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, let's bring it home to 9s.
Bring it home to 9s. It's hard to, I frame it a lot from my own therapy experience, of course, with my own therapist, but I'm also a social 9, so I can look different than other 9s. 9s, it's so weird, especially as a 9. 9s can be my favorite clients or my least favorite clients because I can like, they come in, it's so in 9's defense mechanisms. Like, whereas an 8 might get angry with me if I push, a 9 will actually sometimes get physically sleepy or like shutting down or like, or they'll actually start yawning. And then like, that's so my jam too as a 9, like that sort of shutting down, that I almost like merge with that. And I'm like, and it's easy for me to sort of get sucked into that, like, I don't know either, man. Like, it's so weird, especially because it's so familiar to me. Or a 9 who's like really, and it's so hard for a 9 to be, I think that's what shifts things for me to my favorite 9s that are easier to work with and ones that are hard to work with, if there's no awareness. If I'm like, maybe it's this, or like, no. Like, are you struggling with this? No. Is this hard? No. Like, then why are you here? It could be like, it's hard for them to get in touch with that at all. Like, what their own awareness of what they need and what's hard and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that probably is the most difficult part for 9s. And I think it's similar also with 7s, is to even just realize that there is a problem, that to even come to the point where they get up enough momentum to do something about there being a problem. Is probably one of the bigger obstacles, rather than once they're actually in. I mean, I'm sure once they're actually at the therapist's office, then there's still engagement that needs to happen. But even just getting to that point, I think, is a huge sort of, unless someone brings them, and then that's a whole nother story. Because
and that's a whole different story. I don't like that at all, usually with that. And I can tell pretty quick that that's happened, like a couple.
Yeah.
Let me guess, you're here because she made you, or he made you, or whatever. With 9s, oh man, I forgot what I was going to say again. But yeah, so what can make it harder for 9s to, usually when people come into therapy, their defense mechanisms or the way they've been protecting themselves is now causing more harm than good, right? Sort of, it's become maladaptive, their coping mechanisms, which is my favorite thing to tell people about therapy, is like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not bad. The way you learned to protect yourself growing up was needed and important, and it was genius the way you figured out to do it. But now in life, for whatever reason, it's causing more harm than good, and that's probably why you're here. Because it's ruining relationships, it's causing addictions. But the 9's defense mechanism can be such a pulling back and not causing any problems with other people, at least, that it's hard to see. Like an 8 can be really angry and aggressive, and it's like, I'm hurting everybody, I'm abusive. It's like, that's easy to say, hey, maybe you need to go to therapy. But for 9, it's like, that guy has no problems with anybody, he's never mad, like, why does he need to, right? But 9s, it can be addictions a lot of ways, like a lot of numbing out addictive behaviors that don't look as, and they can be so hidden too with a 9. It's so hard because they can be so withdrawn into themselves and not sharing. It's harder for other people to see, and they have to sort of get tired of their own crap to sort of to sort of make it into therapy. And
I think 9s also can feel at a certain point, and I love the way that you lined up that whole, like, from childhood, the things that we used, we needed them. And I have this whole workshop that I do on the childhood wound that is all about that, how brilliant it is the way that you protect yourself. But then there's just a point where we grow up, right? There's a point where we stop needing the pacifier, the bottle, the diaper. Like, we stop needing all of these things that all of a sudden they're keeping us from actually being the fullest, highest version of ourselves. And I think with 9s, it can even just be like a drift, the kind of this drifting without aimlessly, without sort of feeling like they have that purpose and that direction to go into, or feeling taken advantage of. I know a lot of 9s come to me for coaching when they feel like I'm just tired of being walked all over. I'm just tired of, nobody listening to me, nobody seeing me, all of that stuff. And I always think these are the things that wake us up, right? These are not bad things necessarily, because it brought you to this point that now you're awake, which is very, a good thing for 9s, especially to be awake.
Yes. Yeah. There's a quote by this lady, Teresa of Avila. She was like a mystic saint from the 1500s. She says, first there was the fall, then there was the recovery of the fall. Both are the mercy of God. So it's like even the falling and the derailing of your train that has always worked so well needed to happen.
Yeah.
Like you don't realize it's not working until it doesn't work anymore. In my opinion, there's no shame in that. Like, why would anybody change what they're doing if it wasn't working, unless their hand was kind of forced?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there can be, but it can take a lot. It's hard to maybe see for 9s. And what could happen for a 9 is to sort of get in touch with their stress wing and intentionally, and like stop telling themselves like, no, it's going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. We're going to be fine. But like, if I don't do something about this, they could really look bad down the line. That was with me, at least. Sort of seeing my behaviors and seeing very clearly one day what they were going to do if I kept ignoring them.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't not take care of this. I don't want to end up there. I don't want to regret that.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, that I don't know if you use an example, the whole childhood wound. I like the example of a cast.
Yes.
Like if you have a broken arm and a cast, that's needed and it's helped heal. But if you never take it off, it starts to hurt, and it starts to like hurt you and cause problems. Same with these things.
Yeah. And it keeps you from having just like the full range of motion, right? It keeps you from being that full itself. So I kind of think of it as like a cast or even a cage, right? A cage, it keeps you safe. Like if you have a puppy and you put them in a little cage, like you love them and you're keeping them safe and you're keeping them like confined because they're still little. But then at some point it keeps you in bondage, and it really it doesn't keep you safe anymore. It's just keeping you locked up.